Welcome to another edition of the Radio Coffee House Show, where Jesus meets coffee meets talk radio. And the next one starts right now. How's it going, everybody? Clint Armitage with the Radio Coffee House. Thanks for coming back and thanks for checking and listening in. All right, we got another episode and we're starting this series in Nehemiah. Last time we got Nehemiah chapter 1, we talked about what Nehemiah was doing. He was setting up with prayer to the Lord for some favor, right? And we broke down all those little sections within chapter 1 about how to live the Christian life, or at least how to get into a proper way of praying to God and kind of the steps that gets you there that Nehemiah took that created a model for us, a prayer model. And now we're going to get into chapter 2. Now, chapter 2 is the actual ask for the thing that Nehemiah is, this burden that Nehemiah has, and he's going to be asking the king for favor. And he's basically asking the Lord to give him favor so that he can get favor from the king. And that's what we're going to talk about in chapter 2. Also, we're going to be talking about the prayer challenge because we're going to be starting that up. So let's do this. All right, how's it going, everybody? Yes, it's Clint Armitage, just like the intro just said. And we're here. The Radio Coffee House is out of the studio on the road doing shows, and we're doing some special things. And one of the things that we're going to be doing here is a prayer challenge. So before we get into this episode or this breakdown of Nehemiah chapter 2, we're actually going to be talking about the prayer challenge and the contest giveaway that we're going to be doing just so that we can start up our socials and start creating a community, an interactive community on our socials, since we're just getting that started. All right, so first things first, I gave you the socials that we're going to be using. That's going to be Instagram and Twitter/X for this interactive, for this giveaway thing that we're going to be doing. Now, the prayer challenge and the contest giveaway, although they're one thing, they're kind of like two separate things, just kind of included in one. And so we're going to break that down here today. We're going to talk about the prayer challenge, and then we're going to get into Nehemiah chapter 2. There's two things. One is the prayer challenge, and one is the weekly cash giveaways. Let's start off with the prayer challenge. So in honor of starting up our socials, we're doing this prayer challenge and contest giveaway. Now, here's a little bit of background. Since we've been on the road, we've been out of the studio doing shows all over the place, we started eating at Cracker Barrel. And, at all different Cracker Barrels all over the place. And, kind of felt led to go to Cracker Barrel, not only to eat their food, but also to pray for their staff. So that's what we started doing. This is kind of how the prayer challenge, or what we're now calling the prayer challenge, and this contest giveaway kind of was born. So this is the prayer challenge that we're going to be doing. Again, you'll be finding everything on our social media page. The Instagram page will have this. We'll probably be using the Twitter/X page or social as well, but that's made for news. We'll see how we're going to do that. Right now, we're going to be doing it on Instagram, so make sure you check us out. And our handle on Instagram is @Radio Coffee House, no spaces. Okay, so again, the prayer challenge is this. When you're at a restaurant, what we're asking you to do is to, do your order, whatever restaurant you're at, do your order, and once the wait person brings the food to your table, what we want you to do is tell them that you usually pray before you eat, which is what we hope you do anyway. And then let them know that you would like to know if you could add a prayer for them or for someone in their family, since you're going to be praying over your food in just a minute anyway. So that is what we're asking you to do. Do it at a restaurant. And why are we asking you? Because this is what we were doing at all these different Cracker Barrels. Now, you don't have to do it at a Cracker Barrel. You can do it at any restaurant, but we just happen to do it at a Cracker Barrel. And so ever since we started this, and we've done a ton of them now, at not only a Cracker Barrel, but other different restaurants, so far what has happened is every wait person we've talked to, we've asked to pray for, they have actually had a prayer request, a specific need in their life or the life of their family member, and they have asked us to pray. And these prayers have ranged from difficult living situations to sicknesses to being able to travel and visit family that they want to visit during the holidays or something like that. That's all these different prayer requests that have come in since we've done it. And so far, it's 100%. Like, God is doing something big here, because every time we've asked if they wanted prayer, the wait person has said yes. They've either allowed us to pray for them separately, or they've actually wanted to. I had one actually just today when I was at a Cracker Barrel today. I asked if she wanted prayer, and she said yes, and she gave me the circumstances. And then later I said, hey, you know what? I asked for more specifics so we can ask to help with her specific situation and any specific obstacles that were in her way. And then she told me them. And then I said, would you mind if, do you have time? Do you mind if I pray with you here, is what I asked her. She said, no, not at all. As a matter of fact, I want to pray with you, is what she said. So it was pretty amazing. So the prayer happened, and it was just awesome to see God work with two strangers, right? Talking to each other, and then God intervening and getting in the middle of it and doing something big and working in this wait person's life. And so it's pretty amazing what God's been doing. So anyways, that's the prayer challenge. If you can, that's what I suggest you do. So far, we're 100%. God has been allowing us to be 100% successful with every time we've asked if they needed prayer. And so I'm assuming that that's going to be the same thing with you, that God's going to bless your efforts as well. And it's so easy because it's not like a difficult situation. It's not awkward or anything. It's just the food comes out, and then you just say, hey, I usually pray over my food before I eat. Is there a prayer that I can see for you or your family member? And then they've always said yes. So I think that's going to happen with you as well. So that's the prayer challenge, to go out there and try that in a restaurant that you eat at. And then let us know if you've been doing that and how it's been going and all that stuff. And so that's the prayer challenge. Now, what the contest giveaway is a little bit different. So what it is we're giving away $100 on a weekly basis for as long as there's money in the contest fund. That's right, $100, and you can win it pretty easily. You got to be a little bit savvy on the internet, maybe, or know some people. Basically means that there's going to be a winner every week for the foreseeable future. So again, you want to go to our Instagram page, and again, it's at Radio Coffee House, no spaces, and then do follow the contest rules. We'll be putting it up by the time this show comes out. It should already be up, okay? And then that's basically the prayer challenge and the contest giveaway. So let's get into that, and let's start interacting and form a community here. Again, we're trying to bless you for blessing us. You bless us by your prayers and by listening to the podcast and to our music station, supporting us that way. And then we support you by doing giveaways and contests and kind of these fun games. So now let's go ahead and get into Nehemiah chapter 2. This is where Nehemiah is going to be praying for and then taking the opportunity that comes to him. He's praying for this opportunity, what he wants. Remember the last chapter we talked about him really having this burden to rebuild the wall, and then he was asking God for favor, and he was confessing sin and all that stuff to ask God to help him during this circumstance, because now he's in front of the king. Well, that's what chapter 2 is all about. Now he's going to be praying, to God, and he's going to do it in a specific way, and I want to talk about that. We'll break that down. But then he's also going to take an opportunity, and then we're going to see a model that's created here in chapter 2. We talked about the model starting in chapter 1, and then we'll talk about the model in chapter 2 after we're done with that. So let's start off chapter 2, verse 1. Here we go. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. What's interesting there, as we look at that one little passage, he talks about the king at that time as King Artaxerxes. And so he says the wine is there, and he takes the wine and gives it to the king. Meaning he takes the wine, he tastes it, makes sure there's no poison, and then he gives it to the king. And once he gives it to the king, he says, I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked. So obviously his face, his demeanor, Nehemiah's face and demeanor was sad. And the king noticed. And then because he noticed, the king asked, why does your face look so sad? You're not ill. And then the king determined this can only be sadness of heart. Well, what's interesting here is the king noticed that Nehemiah was sad. He was downcast. So what that tells us is he is not normally like that. And typically, if you're standing before the king, you don't want to be Mr. Grouch, right? You don't want to be all Mr. Sad Face all the time anyway. But it's obvious that Nehemiah was not, because the king noticed the difference. That also says something about the king as well. The king noticed Nehemiah. Okay, even though Nehemiah was a servant, he still noticed Nehemiah, because there's some kings that don't care about his people. And all that king would do, if they don't care about the people, he don't care what they look like, what they're doing. He doesn't recognize them, doesn't know their name. But obviously King Artaxerxes actually cared about Nehemiah, and it kind of says something about his character as a king, right? He noticed something about Nehemiah. But that also says that Nehemiah does not normally look like that. He's not downcast all the time. So the king noticed something. And then the king also noticed, hey, man, it looks like you're sad. That's the only thing it could be. And now we move on to the next verse here. It says, I was very much afraid afraid. But I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my fathers are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? Okay, we'll stop there because it says here that Nehemiah is afraid. Why would Nehemiah be afraid? Just because he's sad. It's because a king could take your life if he didn't like the way you looked. If he didn't like something about you, you could die. He could take your life. And this is what happened in other kingdoms here. But again, Artaxerxes cared about Nehemiah, and Nehemiah was obviously a good servant. So that relationship wasn't like that. But he was afraid because the king could do that if you did something out of protocol. Like if you, in this case, he wasn't, fit and firm, that proper look. He didn't have that proper look approaching the king with the wine and all that. You could be killed just like in Esther, right? Remember, Esther went to the king without, asking for her or calling for her. Well, she did that and she was fearful too because she could have been killed because it was against protocol. Same with this here, against and out of protocol. So that's why Nehemiah was afraid. But then he said to the king, he said, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad? Okay, he starts telling the king, well, I'm sad because look, the place where my fathers are buried lies in ruins. Jerusalem is, burnt, the gates have been destroyed, and how can I not be sad? Okay, so now he's telling the king what is going on. But the king has noticed this. So let's move on. Right after he said that, he said that, it was destroyed the gates were destroyed by fire. Nehemiah says, the king said to me, what is it you want? All right, so now the king asks him the question. And I want you to notice what Nehemiah does next, because this is the interesting part. This is where he slips in a strategic prayer to God for favor. Here we go. Verse 4. The king said to me, what is it you want? Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my fathers are buried so that I can rebuild it. Okay, so there was the big ask. But notice what Nehemiah did right before he did this ask to the king. He said, then I prayed to the God of heaven. So he slipped in a quick little prayer. And that's what Paul means, right? When he says that we have to pray continuously. This is one of those things. He's in the middle of a conversation with the king. And so he's got to be totally focused. He's got to be ready to speak to the king. And then when the king asks him a question, Nehemiah prays. He does a silent prayer and he prays to the God of heaven. And that prayer was obviously a quick little help me, Lord, type of prayer. And we can do that. We can do that, and it doesn't take much, but we have to practice it. I've noticed that I've had to kind of put it into a routine, put it in my mind, rehearse, because it doesn't come naturally all the time. And then we get in a situation that kind of catches us off guard or we're not ready for. And then we could say that quick prayer, Lord, help, just something simple like that. And that's kind of what this is for Nehemiah. He's asking the Lord for help right before he asks the question to the king. And so he prays, and then he says, if it pleases the king, basically what he wants to do is he wants to, he basically says, if the servant has found favor in your sight, let me go to the city of Judah where my fathers are buried, and I want to go rebuild it. That's what he's asking. That's the favor. That's the big ask that he wants from the king. And then it goes on in verse 6. It says, then the king with the queen sitting beside him asked me, how long will your journey take? And then the king also asks, not only how long will the journey take, and then he says, and when will you get back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple and for the city wall and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king granted my requests. Okay, so let's stop there at verse 8 and let's take a look. This is why he had to ask God for prayer. I mean, this is a huge ask. Not only is he asking to leave so that he can go rebuild this wall, he's also asking the king to give him letters. One, so he can have safe passage till he gets to Jerusalem. And then also he's asking for the wood, the timber needed to rebuild the wall and his house and all that stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that he's asking the king. So it's huge. And that's why he needed to pray to God. And then after he says this in end of verse 8, he says, and because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king king granted my requests. See, he recognized why the king granted his request, because the gracious hand of God was upon him, because he prayed and God answered him. Okay, verse 9. So I went to the governor of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me. The king sent all these darn people with him to protect him and all this stuff. So the king really helped out Nehemiah here. But that's because God is behind it. So verse 10. Okay, we're going to see a little bit of stuff going on here now in verse 10. When Sanballat, the Horonite, and Tobiah, the Ammonite official, heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. So why are they upset here? Why are they disturbed? They don't want this project to happen. Well, one of the things going on here is Tobiah the Ammonite. If you remember, the Ammonites did not help out the Israelites as Moses was trying to get them through to the promised land. They were trying to cut through the Ammonites, land and all that, and they didn't help them out. And so God kind of punished them and all that. Even though they're related, they kind of been enemies of the Israelites, the Ammonites. So, this could be part of it. Tobiah is an Ammonite, and him and Sanballat were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites, because they don't want the welfare of the Israelites to prosper. So let's move on. Maybe we'll hear more about what's going on with them, okay? All right, let's see, verse 11. I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few men. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. Okay, so we're stopping there in verse 12. So it says that he gets to Jerusalem, and then he stays there 3 days, and then he starts going out at night just with a few men. So he has a small unit with him, and he didn't tell anybody anything what God had actually put in his heart. And he didn't go with much, only a few men, but he went out at night so that no one knew what was going on. He was basically doing surveillance. He was doing a recon mission. So verse 13, by night I went out through the valley gate toward the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on toward the Fountain Gate and the King's Pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally, I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or to the priests or nobles or officials or any others who would be doing the work. Okay, so you see what he's doing here. He's doing a recon mission. And what's one of the things you have to do if you're doing undercover work, if you're working with this confidential undercover type of position, you don't want to tell people anything, because word travels super fast. Gossip is crazy. You tell one person and that it's like wildfire. So what Nehemiah is doing here is he's actually doing a proper recon mission. He's doing UC work or undercover work, where he's doing all this stuff under the cover of night, and he's not telling anybody what he's doing, so they don't know exactly what's going on. And that's how he's able to get all this information, get all this intel and data without anyone really knowing what's going on. So we move on to the next verse, verse 17 here, and it says this: Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in? Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God upon me and what the king had said to me. They replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. Okay, so in those verses, what you see is he actually tells people now. He starts telling them, hey, you see you see Jerusalem is in ruins. We've got to do something here. And he starts collecting help to help him rebuild it, because he can't do it alone. So he starts recruiting people. He starts off with basically explain the burden that God has given to him, and he's now giving it to the other people here, the people that's going to help him as he recruits them. He says, look, Jerusalem is in ruins, and our gates are all burned with fire. Come, let's come together and let's rebuild this wall in Jerusalem, okay? And then we'll no longer be in disgrace. And then what happens after that is he tells them that the gracious hand of God was upon me. So he tells them the story about what happened with the king, right? And that's what we want to do with other believers. Other people we're trying to recruit in this mission that God's sending us on. When God opens it up or allows the opportunity, now we can start to tell other believers, hey, this is what God is doing. This is the burden he's placed on my heart. And this is what God has already done to open the door. Come with me. And that's what he's doing right here. Okay. And then so they replied, hey, let's do it. Let's start rebuilding. Okay. And then they started the good work. All right. Verse 19. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official and Gershom the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What is this you're doing? They asked. Are you rebelling against the king? I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. Okay, that's the end of chapter 2. But as you can see, there's the antagonist. This is where it starts, where people are coming against him. And who is it? These 3 specific guys. It's Sanballat, and then it's Tobiah, and then it's this other guy that gets added, Gershom. All right, these guys mock and ridicule Nehemiah and what they're trying to do. Now, that's similar to what happens to us when we're trying to start a project for God. We're trying to do what God tells us to do, and then we get people that oppose us. We have people that stand up and say, you can't do that. You're not qualified enough. You don't have the skills, all that kind of thing. When God has already told us we can do it, we can do it. When God has already said, I am with you, then he is with you. If you are sure that God has put you on this path to do this specific thing, this project, this job, this position, this leadership thing, whatever it is, this new business, whatever it is, if he has told you in your heart of hearts, then no matter what anybody says, you can do it because the hand of God is with you. Just like Nehemiah said, they ridiculed him, they mocked him, and then he answered with this. He said, the God of heaven will give us success. See, because it's not on us. It's not on us. If this is a God thing, it's with God. It's on God. So he says it correctly. He says, yeah, you may be ridiculing me, but the God of heaven will give us success. Why? Because it's God's will. I already know it. He has told me. I'm 100% sure. And that's how he answers this opposition. And that's how we should answer opposition too, is if we know that God has put us on the path to do this project, to do this thing, then we are all good. Why? Not because of us, not because of our skills, not because of our talents. It's because God, the hand of God is with us, and he will give us success. We're not going to get success out of our own strength or might. We're going to get it because God has given us success. So that's an awesome way to answer that. All right, so we just finished up chapter 2. Now the model that we're going to start seeing here is a business model. See, in the first chapter, we see kind of a prayer model, a Christian life prayer model. And then in chapter 2, we start to see a business model. First of all, we got Nehemiah praying, and then the opportunity opens up because God opened up the opportunity. He prayed about it and he took it. And then he asked for as much as he could, as much as he needed, because he prayed about it and God led him to it and God opened the door. And so you see in a business model, what we have is you pray for the things that God's leading you to. And then when the opportunity opens up that he's opened up for you, you take it. And you take it as far as you can take it, as God has led you to take it. And then you start inspecting that project. In this case, Nehemiah's rebuilding. So what he's doing a little recon mission. So you should do your research too. So in your business, if you're starting a business, if you're going to the next level in business, you have to start doing your research. Research and inspect the project. Really do some recon on it. Know what you're getting into. And then once you've got that, now start recruiting people to help. If God has called you to it and he's called you to get other people, which is most likely the case, then you start recruiting people and you give them the vision. You give them the burden that the Lord has put on you, and then you give them the vision and you let them know that God is behind this. So let's get together and do this whole thing. And that's what Nehemiah did. And see, that's the business model. You pray for the opportunity. The opportunity comes, you take it. Then you start doing your recon. You research what you need to do. And then you start recruiting the right people to help you out. And then you let them know the burden. And then you let them know the motivation and that God is behind it. And that's how you're going to start to build a business. And so there's the first chapter was prayer model. The second chapter, we start to see the business model. Now we're going to see a little bit more as we go through the other chapters here, because we're going to get about 7 chapters in through this whole series. But that's it for now. And hopefully that was, something that you can start to glean some information from, especially if you're starting a business. Go ahead and dig into Nehemiah and you get to really see a good business model that Nehemiah has kind of exemplified for us. All right. So until next time, my name is Clint Armitage. Don't forget to check us out on the socials, especially Instagram at Radio Coffee House No Spaces. And until next time, stay safe and God bless. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Radio Coffee House Show, where we're all about Jesus, coffee, and radio. We'll see you next time.